Thank you, Chair. It's ready to go.
Okay, I think I got a couple of minutes. We should probably wait. I'm expecting thousands and thousands of interested citizens to tune into this.
Of course.
We're still missing the mayor. I don't know about Gordy, if he's working or if he's going to show up. Cynthia, I see a logo for you. I assume you're there somewhere.
Yes, I'm here.
Good. And then we have the illustrious Mr. Kobayashi. So.
Ohio gozaimasu, Councillor Parkinson, Chair Parkinson.
How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you.
Glad to hear it. Do we have anybody from the public registered to speak?
We do not have anyone registered to speak today, just
Okay.
us.
So if I forget, if anybody pops up and I forget, please interrupt me and remind me. I'll try. I think they're supposed to be able to speak on each different topic. So. Okay, everybody on best behavior. The mayor's here now.
Hey, Stuart, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent.
Okay, I've got 2:30, so I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance and Governments Committee to order for Monday, April 9th, 2021. Start by acknowledging we're on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Gordy's here. Oh, Gordy. Seeing none will the agenda is approved. Can I get a motion to adopt the minutes? Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Any discussion? Seeing none, by mutual consent, I'll call those approved. Again, we have no public participation at this time. So the first topic on today's agenda is the proclamation policy. I'm going to ask Amanda to introduce that one for us, please. And you're muted, Amanda. You're pulling a Michael Baxter on us.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So during the February 8th, 2021 regular council meeting, Mayor Martin questioned issuing proclamations and whether it was something the city should continue doing. During our research,
and then take a period there. That's interim. Put a period there because then that's no interim buttoned up, right? So you've blocked it and you've agreed to provide some other access route that's an interval of 1 acre.
Hey, Brent.
Hang on one second.
You're muted. Mute yourself.
Hang on one sec, Georgia. Sorry. Mute myself. Thanks very much. I've just finished. I'm just on the phone call. Thanks, Rob.
We noticed. Back to you, Amanda.
Okay, so during our research, we discovered that a majority of municipalities and other local governments and other levels of government issued proclamations with policies in place to guide them. There are, however, some who have chosen to no longer issue proclamations, but are undertaking a review of their policies and procedures to ensure that they satisfy the legal requirements as set out in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In 2018, a BC Court of Appeals underscored the need for carefully drafted policies and highlighted the importance of implementing transparent processes to ensure that competing rights and community objectives are respected and balanced in accordance with the Charter values. Today, Corporate Services has brought forward a proclamation policy providing a framework and criteria to follow when considering and issuing proclamations. Staff is asking that if proclamations continue to be issued, that adoption of the proclamation policy be recommended to Council.
Thank you, Amanda. Council, what's your wish? We have two choices. We could go with a recommendation, or that the proclamations no longer be issued. If we're going to go with a recommendation, then I would be open if anybody had any comments or recommendations on the policy we have. Councillor Day.
Thank
Oops.
you. I am recommending that we adopt the policy. We have been doing proclamations for as long as I have been on council, and we have had many that help to bring our community together. The list that has been provided with the report identifies many of them that I recall, including arts and culture celebrations, multicultural awareness, etc. I think this is one opportunity for us as a council to operate as a part of the community, fostering better communication among all participants in activities in and around the local government. So I think that although it does take a little bit of time on our agendas, the good definitely outweighs the bad.
Thank you, Councillor Day. So I take it that you're moving the policy as written and are happy with that?
Correct.
Okay. I don't think I need a seconder, and then so I'll look for, and I'll assume that's motivation by you. It was a good job. Turn to Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just have a question to ask. I'm neither here nor there on them. It's a proclamation. I'm just wondering, I mean, for the time spent on them, they don't seem to have any teeth to them, do they? Or do they not? I don't, I'm just trying to understand that in my own head. There's a lot of time that I understand that is spent putting together a proclamation, because they have to be carefully worded. And so I'm just trying to understand to myself, like, what teeth do they have? So that's question number one. And then my second question is actually directed to the mayor. If Mayor Martin is comfortable with, it says here it's his call. If this was to pass, I'm just wondering if Mayor Martin is comfortable with making it his call, because there's nothing like declaring a proclamation and having the rest of your council disagree with the proclamation. So it's just my viewpoint. And if he is comfortable with it, then and if everyone feels it's a good thing to do, then we'll let her go. Thank you.
Yeah, be kind of like losing a vote 6-1 or something like that. Maybe before we go to the mayor, I see he's next on the speakers list. Amanda, could you comment on how much time it goes into these proclamations, or somebody from staff?
Generally, they're provided to us from the organization. So they usually build the proclamation for us. Generally, it doesn't take that much time. I want to say half an hour max.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Martin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I have a question, and then I'll have a couple comments. So can I just clarify through staff? My understanding with the proclamations, and part of the reason it's here, is that it's an either all or none situation, not the ability that I have to say I'm going to support this one but not the next one. Am I correct or am I not correct? Because, and the reason I bring this up is I saw, I believe it was the city of Kelowna copied me on a proclamation in regards to the Wounded Warriors, and said, we have supported the proclamation to support Wounded Warriors in the past, but we're not doing any anymore, even though you're very worthy of it. We're not doing proclamations because we're in the situation of either having to do all requested proclamations or none. Am I correct or am I incorrect on that?
Amanda, you want to tackle that one?
Okay. So in the research that we did, we found that the city of Kamloops, they are no longer issuing proclamations, but they are undertaking a review of their policy. And from what I've discovered through our research, it shows that most municipalities do have a policy that outlines exactly how they'll issue them. So that provides some criteria so that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. As
Okay.
well, sorry, the Court of Appeals did highlight that the importance of having a drafted policy that we would abide by as well to protect ourselves.
Okay, so I'm supportive of the motion then, if it's an all or none. I'll tell you where it becomes uncomfortable for me is just when there's for example, I can't think of the group's name. It's Fung Hong Show. I can't remember. Forgive me, and I mispronounced that. I know brutally, but it's that organization that is sort of anti-communist, and that they do like exercises like Tai Chi.
Falun Gong.
Thank you. And so they make requests to me that to support what they're doing, and for example, the Hells Angels may do a teddy bear drive and ask that we support that through a proclamation. And so it's just when you start to get into some of those gray areas, and I was at one point I was under the impression that it was an all or none, and I certainly did not feel comfortable with supporting every single proclamation that's requested. But hearing what staff have commented, then I am very comfortable with the motion. So thank you, Chair.
Mayor, if you could, Councillor Kobayashi was concerned about your having sole say on these things, whether you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I am. And truth of the matter is, I would be engaged with all the council anyway, sort of in an informal way of just checking out with people to make sure that I wasn't offside. So I certainly would keep everybody engaged in that. So yeah, I would feel comfortable.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, I have Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, wow, I'm already unmuted. Amazing.
That's a new record.
I support the motion, but I think there is one small amendment needed. And to explain that, on the first page of the proclamation, right at the bottom, it says proclamations that demonstrate an interest in or relationship with the city and demonstrate respect for the city's residents may be approved if they meet the following criteria. And that means, I think, reading that, it means they have to meet all the following criteria, which is unlikely to ever happen. So I think we need to add something in there that says if they meet one of the following criteria. And then over the page, it says proclamations will not be issued for requests that are, and it lists all the things they might be, and second to last line of the bullets, it says and. So proclamations will not be issued for requests that are all of those things, because it's a list with and at the end. And obviously, we're not likely to get anything that's all of those things. But if something came in that was only hateful and not any of those other things, we would have to approve it, which I don't think is the intent. So there, I think we need to change the and to or. And maybe just to be really clear, at the end of proclamations will not be issued for requests that are any of the following. So I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion along the lines of what I just said, and I'm quite happy to repeat it all so that we can be fair.
I think we've got it, Michael. So what we're saying here under criteria on the second line may be approved if they meet one of the following criteria.
Right.
And on the proclamations will not be issued for requests that are any of the following and take out on the 6th line, I think it is the and I guess put in an or. Would that satisfy you?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, that's probably okay with everybody. I could lower all the hands and start all over again, but I'm going to say if anybody disputes that, speak now, and if you don't, we'll consider it approved by consensus.
I just wanted to add that I don't think you've contemplated, they may meet more than one of those criteria. So I just think that if, you know, we're kind of at that point of splitting hairs, but you know, they may meet more than one of that criteria.
So if that was changed to read one or more of the following criteria,
Perfect.
okay. Okay, well, we have an amendment. Anybody else wish to discuss the amendment? So I'm going to say that by consensus, the motion we're talking about is now the amended motion. Michael, are you done?
Yes, absolutely.
Councillor Jansen, you're next. And you must be muted.
There we go. I had to find the button. Tell you what, rather than being a cheerleader, I'm going to take a slightly different tack here. I'm quite frankly would be more comfortable if we just put a stop to this like some other communities have. I think this opens up Pandora's box for you supported them, but you're not supporting us, and whose opinion is righter. And you know, and I'd hate to see us as a council get into it because we disagree about a particular proclamation, and then we end up having to speak publicly against it if it goes against any of your beliefs or your conscience. And I just wonder if this day and age is come and gone. I think there's other ways to show support for community groups and events, whether it be through our communications department or you know, the mayor or specific council members speaking to the media or what have you. But I just wonder, and the examples that the mayor gave are on point. Okay, so we support, you know, a group like the Rotarians, but then we don't support the toy ride. Again, supported by other nefarious groups. So it just opens up Pandora's box, and I wonder, I don't believe there's any net benefit because again, as Councillor Kobayashi pointed out, there's no teeth, there's nothing there, there's no wraparound. It's just a benign statement that we're not opposed to something. So those are my thoughts, Mr. Chair, and I'll go ahead and mute myself.
Okay, thank you. If this motion as presented by fails, I'll give you a chance to move a different one. Amanda, I see your hand is up. Did you want to chime in? I see your hand is not up. Councillor Day, you're next to speak.
I just had one question that occurred to me as the discussion went on about meeting one or more of the criteria. And that was that it does say that proclamations will be prepared at the mayor's discretion. So that does give us some power. My concern was, what if we get 7 different requests for a proclamation in June, for example, and maybe we need to prioritize that in order to be reasonable. But I think that perhaps that is enough, and I just thought perhaps we could ask staff whether or not they had considered or if they have ever experienced having too many at the same time.
Yep. Amanda, do you want to comment on that?
In my experience, when I was doing proclamations, we generally would receive one a month. They're usually standard ones that we received on an annual basis. So like Heart Health Month, things like that. I want to say that there wasn't an occasion where there were competing ones, but I could be wrong. Marcy may have more background with that.
Great,
Well,
thanks.
we just leave it to the mayor to stick handle that problem when it happens. I don't have any, oh, I do have another hand up. Hang on. Councillor Jansen, did you want to speak again?
Yeah, sorry, just a final thought that, what if we disagree with the mayor? Does it have to come to the table and then we have a public debate over the worth of a proclamation? Like,
We
this is a bit of
can't
a-
be having public debates every time we disagree with the mayor. We'll be going on
This
for
is a-
days.
Yeah, those meetings will get really long.
this is a rabbit hole. And one I don't want to go in because there's enough rabbit holes down at Royal Bay there.
I don't see any other hands. We have a motion in front of us to, let me just, Finance and Governance Committee recommend to council that proclamation policy be adopted. That proclamation policy has been amended a couple of minor times, which I think we all understand. Those in opposition to the motion. I have Councillor Jansen and Councillor Parkinson in opposition. Motion passes. Next, moving along to Amanda, do you want to lead us through the public hearing policy, please?
Sure. Back in November, Corporate Services committed to taking over the public hearing process once we were fully staffed. And now that we're fully staffed, we're working with Development Services to transition the public hearing process to our department. To manage this process clearly and efficiently, we are putting forward a public hearing policy that will streamline the collection of information and how public hearings are conducted. The current practice is that all information received from the time of the application is submitted forms part of the public hearing binder. Some of the downfalls of this practice are inconsistency due to information being received through a variety of channels. Not all applications submitted proceed to public hearing, and public submitting information may not be aware that their comments are forming part of the public record and could have an freedom of information and protection of privacy implication. The policy also addressed how public hearings would be conducted, including time limits and permitted conduct of those in attendance, as well as council's role during the public hearing. The clarity of the public hearing policy will provide clear, consistent direction and process for public, staff, and council. Staff asks that the policy is acceptable. If the policy is acceptable to the committee, that adoption of the public hearing policy be recommended to council.
Thank you, Amanda. Maybe if I could just ask a quick question before we leave. You suggested that people who want to comment on as public hearing and submit might be subject to freedom of information. Could you explain what you meant there?
Okay, so what that means is that currently when we collect this information, not everyone's aware that they're going to form part of the public record. So their information is included in the binder, but it may be something that was received by the mayor or one of the council members or a staff member, but they haven't been contacted to say that, you know, this is going to form a part of the public record. So that may have freedom of information and privacy implications based on that.
But if anybody sends me an email, then it's subject to freedom of information, isn't it?
Yes, but we wouldn't release that information unless we had a freedom of information request. But when it comes to public hearing, we just want to create clear guidelines on when we'll start accepting the information that'll be a form part of the public hearing binder as the public record, and we will notify those people when they submit that information. So
Thank you.
so it's clear to everyone.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay. I have Councillor Day.
Thank you. I've carefully read through the draft with the policy, and I have an issue with the amount of time that is given to the proponent at a public hearing. So they get to speak for twice as long as a resident. They're given 10 minutes in this policy, whereas residents are only given 5 minutes. And I mean, that could be adjusted. Also, that is in the policy as well, that if we're having a very long public hearing, the number of minutes may be adjusted for each person. But I think that since our obligation is to the community, and especially where we're talking about official community plan and public hearing issues, I think it's important that there isn't an advantage in our procedure for the proponent of a project who would get to speak not only twice as long, but many times. So that is my concern. I think we want to hear all sides and we want to understand it, but I don't think we want to weight this in anyone's favor.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I maybe clarify, Amanda, I thought the proponent was allowed to speak initially for 10 minutes and then again at the end to answer any questions. Are they allowed to speak more than that under this policy?
Sorry about that. So it does say that applicants are encouraged to provide presentation materials for the agenda, and that the applicant will be given the opportunity to clarify points raised or respond to questions after members of the public have spoken.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair Parkinson. Through you to Amanda. Amanda, I just want to get it clear in my own head, because your second bullet where you say correspondence forming part of the public hearing record will be received after first and second reading, but prior to public hearing. So I guess my question is, what about all the correspondence we receive up into first and second reading? Is that not part of the public record, or how does that work? Could you just explain that to me?
So that is what we are saying, that information received prior to the notification, basically it's when the notification is. So that would be after second reading and prior to public hearing is when we would receive the information. So everybody's clear that that's going to form part of the public record.
Okay, so, but what about the information? Like sometimes we get things from the public before even first reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens to those documents? Are they not part of the public record, or?
They wouldn't be a part of the public record, but they would be, of course, in the file. We would keep that information, but it wouldn't form part of the public hearing binder that would be shared.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
You done, Councillor Kobayashi?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, at the top of page 2 of the policy, in the top right box, it says, does not form part of the public hearing unless content is presented by the author in person at the hearing. Right now, we accept things that are presented online. Do we mean to include online when we say in person? I'm talking about people who attend the public hearing virtually and read their input or speak their input.
Can you help us with that, Amanda?
Okay, so we would receive what they're speaking at the public hearing online during the meeting. If we were back in person and they had a documentation that they provided to us at the public hearing, then we would receive that and that would form part of the record. Currently, we do have deadlines when we receive information prior to the meeting. So generally it is 12 p.m. on the day of the public hearing so that we can compile everything and have it in time to be reviewed.
Then I would propose, if I'm understanding correctly, that we amend the policy to add after in person or virtually, if that is enough to make sense, in person or virtually.
Amanda, has that been consistent with the intent here?
Yes, that could work.
Okay. Anybody have any issues with that minor amendment?
Sorry,
Speak
can
up.
I, oh, Chair, or sorry,
Yes,
Councillor
go ahead,
Parkinson.
Mayor.
Can I just get a clarification? So just in regards to electronic or people sharing something virtually, do we not believe that this policy may be offside once the emergency measures of the province? Like I don't have any messaging saying that this what we're doing by Zoom and everything is the long-term strategy, and that people would be allowed to virtually share information moving in the future. So what would happen there? And I see Mr. Earl's hand up. So
Yeah, we'll give Amanda a break and let Mr. Earl answer that one.
Thank you. It may be, an alternate approach to adding or virtually after in person is just strike the words in person. And so I believe it could still read, does not form part of the public hearing unless content is presented by the author at the hearing.
Brilliant.
What if somebody wanted to read a letter that somebody else had prepared?
Then strike by the author.
Less is more.
So then that would say, does not form part of the public hearing unless content is presented at the hearing. Can I get any concerns with that, or we're going to call it approved by consensus? Okay.
I have sorry, you're not lowering the hands, so you don't notice when I put my hand up.
I see you have your hand up, but I'm just doing them in order, and I was hoping it was a minor amendment that people could feel free to speak up on. So please go ahead, Councillor Day.
No problem. The difficulty that I have is that you're cutting off recording the input that you receive after noon on the day of the public hearing, but people are speaking at the public hearing or presenting information at the public hearing, and therefore they're being heard, although you've refused to consider an email that you would have received 2 hours before the meeting started. So my concern is that our net should be wide and we should be able to receive the information. I know there's the issue of trying to present that information at the public hearing for staff, that, you know, they can't still be receiving information as they're heading to the meeting. But we're relying on that documentation for the public hearing binder to come forward with a report at the end, the public hearing report. So I'm just wondering if this is making it more difficult to be more inclusive.
So the people affected might be those that make a point on the afternoon of the public hearing, but don't have a mechanism to get that read into the record on the evening of the public hearing.
Exactly.
Okay, that's fair comment. Anybody else wish to speak on this amendment? Okay, just let me write down the hands here. Michael, I'll write your hand down anyway. Baxter, Mayor. Okay, I'm going to lower all hands and ask anybody who is opposed to the amendment to say so or raise a hand. Now, everybody clear on the amendment we're talking about? You got your hand up, Mayor. Do you want to say something or? Okay, No, all right, okay. So right now, the amendment is just to change the one box that says does not form part of the public hearing unless content is presented by the author in person at the hearing. And the amendment would change that to does not form part of the public hearing unless content is presented at the hearing. Those in opposition to that change? Okay, seeing none, that will be, the motion is hereby amended. Okay, back to the main motion as amended. Michael, you had the floor. Did you have any more to say?
No, thank you.
Your worship, you're next.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a brief comment just in regards to Councillor Day's comment in regards to the applicant having 10 minutes, but members of the public only having 5, and about being fair. I guess I'm comfortable with the 10 and 5, and the reason I'm comfortable with the 10 and 5 is because the public can speak more than once. And it clearly outlines that speakers may speak multiple times on the application. So in fact, the public may have an opportunity to speak for 15 minutes on it if they choose to get up 3 different times, whereas the proponent would only have that 10-minute at the beginning and then at the end. So and as well, I think, you know, the developer who is or the applicant is going to need a little more information because they're actually having to explain the project rather than explaining one aspect of it that they may or may not like, that sometimes public wishes to contribute. So I feel confident in those 2 time periods. Otherwise, I will be supporting the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Day, I see your hand, but perhaps since you've spoken, I'll put my 2 cents worth in here. And like the mayor, I support the time limits on the applicant. You know, in reality, I think what we're trying to do is make sure that there's as much information and accurate information out there as publicly and as widely as possible. And quite frankly, the applicants often have spent months analyzing and working on a project and understand it very well and need some time to explain it and to answer questions at the end. So as the mayor says, if there's somebody with a very detailed response, they have opportunities to come up more than once to spend it. So I'm not as concerned as Councillor Day is about the opportunities for the developer to speak. Now I'll turn the floor to you, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I am still concerned that people are basically prohibited after noon on the day of the public hearing from making a submission that can be recorded for the public hearing. And I am also concerned that the developer has more time to speak. And in fact, the developer can speak many times and has at our public hearings. So what I think we're trying to design is a policy that makes sure that there is accountability so that people don't have to rely on what they think the developer is bringing forward, but actually get a verified, witnessed version of what they're trying to do put forward, and have the ability to identify issues that they are concerned about to council, where that forms part of the record. So because the developer gets to say whatever they want in the public prior to coming to council and giving public hearing, and that's been problematic in the past, that they might say one thing and do another when they're outside of council chambers. But we're trying to provide confidence for the community that they know what's proposed, they understand what the implications are going to be, and that their voice would be considered. And currently, if you're not able to attend in person that evening and you sent an email in the afternoon, you're not going to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Baxter?
I just want to say that as a lifelong procrastinator, I know the costs of procrastinating. And given that I believe there's a 30-day notice of when the public hearing is, I think even I could get a response in within 30 days before noon on the day of the public hearing. So I think I don't see that there's any possibility of somebody's inability to get their feelings on paper into the city, to not get their feelings in within the 30 days. So I can't see that that is an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. So just for clarity, Councillor Day, I mean, your first point about the people submitting in the afternoon having to find a mechanism to submit at night, and maybe there's some people that couldn't do that. I think we addressed that with the amendment already. But the second one, I just wasn't clear. You're saying you want to make sure that the developer or the applicant in a public forum, states their case clearly for everybody to hear and listen. Are you suggesting they should have more time than is currently allotted, or what was your concern there?
No, my concern is that they speak the truth. We have had developments come forward where they've promised many things that have not come to fruition. So I'm just, that's the benefit of it being a public hearing as opposed to whatever open house show that they decide to put on and invite people to come to. We want it to be clear that when they appear before council, that what they say they're going to do, our staff is aware of what they're saying and confirms that what they say is what the documents show.
Thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, so the issue for me is people getting their documents in for the public hearing. And I think we should hear from staff as to whether or not there is 30 days notice, because I'm certainly not aware of there being 30 days notice for public hearings.
Amanda, could you confirm the time limit for public hearings?
Hello, I do not believe that it's 30 days, but you do have to advertise in 2 consecutive newspapers, which then is 2 weeks for sure. So it may be just over 2 weeks.
Okay. Brent, I see Brent Molnar has his hand up. Can you clarify that for us?
Yeah, thanks for the chair.
Or differently than Amanda?
Oh, we do allow, as Amanda does point out, we require 2 consecutive notices, which require a guaranteed 2 business weeks. It's 14 days is which we permit for those inputs to be received. I'm also here to answer any more questions that you may have to address some of the other content.
Thank you very much. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to weigh in, but I was a bit troubled by a comment to suggest that the applicants that are presenting at the public hearing are lying, and at least that's how I took it. And I'm not fussed at at minimizing the 10 minutes. And in fact, looking at the reason for a public hearing, the reason is for developers or even our residents who have rezoning application that need to go to public hearing, come and present as much information, fulsome information as possible. And to limit that, I think, is a disservice. Can you imagine having a public hearing for Royal Bay limited to 5 minutes? That would be absolutely asinine. And so I think there's a difference between having a conversation and answering questions. And Councillor Day is quite right. The developer or the applicant has multiple opportunities to respond and speak, but they're answering questions that are presented by the public. and in many cases at more than one time at the mic. So, I haven't heard that this has been an issue in the 21 years that I've been involved in council. I'm not sure why it's all of a sudden an issue, but I think the status quo is I'm happy with what is proposed, frankly, and I think there's always a little bit of discretion on behalf of the chair, anyways. So I'm not in favor of making any changes to that to those provisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. And I guess, in fact, to Councillor Day is correct. I mean, when an applicant presents to council, they better be telling us what they're doing, and there should be mechanisms to enforce that so that we all know it. And I agree with that. But I do have faith in primarily staff, and I guess a little bit council, to say if somebody comes to public hearing and says, "I'm going to do this," they're obligated to do it. So I agree with that. I see Councillor Baxter's hand up.
Yeah, from my experience sitting in public hearings on the staff side of the table, if an applicant in the public hearing decides to promise a swimming pool that wasn't previously promised and is therefore not in the documentation provided by staff, the only means for that to become a guaranteed promise is for council to add it into the bylaw that results or direct staff to add it into the development agreement, one or the other, after the public hearing. And I don't know if Brent Molnar would have any comments on that.
Through the chair, if welcomed, Councillor Baxter is correct. The public or the developer can promise whatever they want. However, until council resolves it as a condition of the development, as considered by council as a condition of the development, whether obtained through public input, obtained through council, or as learned through staff, it is not a requirement for the development until it's resolved. And so staff do write notes when the public is stating things, and are waiting for that next step on, is it resolved or not? Would council like to report back on it or not? Because it's until it is resolved, it is just discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Molnar. I'm not seeing any hands. Any further discussion on this topic? So we have a motion as slightly amended, which the motion is Finance and Governance Committee recommend to council that the public hearing policy be adopted. Those in opposition? I have Councillor Day in opposition. That motion passes. Next, the thing that keeps us all on the edge of our chairs, the procedural bylaw. Marcy, you want to introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Chair Parkinson. So in the financial plan, council identified the need for staff and council to review and modernize the council committee procedure bylaw. The community charter legislates that municipalities must adopt a procedure bylaw to establish the general rules of procedure to be followed by council and council committees conducting their business. Much of the content of the rules of the procedure are not prescribed, and their specific content is discretionary. The procedure bylaw was adopted in 2004 and has had 3 amendments since that time. The amendments include legislative changes, as well as changes that were made to improve the bylaw. Some of those changes included definitions for inaugural and council meetings, changes to the chair of the committee of the whole, addition of headings under the council agenda structure, public hearing process by considering first and second readings prior to the public hearing, adding authority to hold council or council committee meetings outside the boundary of the municipality, and permitting council to debate a bylaw at any time during the first 3 readings. In 2018, council suspended the city's standing committees and started utilizing the committee of the whole meeting structure. The committee of the whole format was intended to meaningfully enhance council's decision by providing more opportunity for public comment on issues addressed at the committee of the whole meetings. Staff are looking to council determine sections of the procedure bylaw that need review. The bylaw is council's tool to effectively conduct meetings, and it is imperative for staff to hear from council areas that council determine may need review or change. In review of the bylaw, we should look at key objectives, process to consider and decide on amendments, and a regular process for reviewing the bylaw going forward. Before amending, repealing, or substituting the bylaw, we must publish notice describing the proposed changes. The notice must be posted on the city's notice boards, and publishing the 2 consecutive weeks advertising, council would be considering the proposed amendments. Advertisements and notices will be prepared as soon as timelines are set, and direction is given for staff to proceed with amending the bylaw. Some items for council's consideration that they may wish to review is how delegations are heard at meetings, public participation, having a time limit per person. For example, anything over 2 minutes should be a request to address council as a delegation, addressing agenda items only, delegation limit at a meeting. So sometimes, we might have 2 delegations and we could have requests for 4 at the same meeting. Does council want to look at maybe having a cap on that? Taking and certifying of the minutes of council and committee meetings. So we have attached to the report a procedure guide that was created in December of 2020 collaboratively by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and the Local Government Management Association. The guide provides an overview of legislative requirements as well as best practices. So for the timeline, if council directs the preparation of a draft bylaw to update the council committee procedure bylaw, it is anticipated that staff would be bringing it forward by June of 2021 to ensure that the bylaw is in place by summer recess return. And that's it. Over to you.
Thank you, Marcy. Quite a big topic here. Let's, Councillor Baxter, you have the floor.
Yes, question to Marcy through the chair. As I read this, it would not be productive for us to discuss any changes we want to the bylaw in this forum, but maybe provide them informally to staff by email so that you can consider whether you want to add them, and then we will get a chance later on in the process to bring things before council that staff might not have added. Is that more or less the best process?
Well, we are hoping to hear from council, and it depends on how you would feel best to do this. It depends on how many ideas that council have on things that need to be changed. So we might want to look at having a strategic planning session well, and essentially that could be what this is right now, just to get some idea. In the past, what normally happens is the bylaw gets the amendments incorporated within it, and then it's forwarded to council for review. We're doing this in a different way, that we really want council's feedback, because this is council's bylaw. This is how you're going to decide on how you conduct your meetings. And it's really important that staff hear the wishes of council prior to bringing the bylaw forward to you. We want to ensure that we're capturing those. And then there's still time for council to review it before the bylaw came for readings, but we want that assistance prior to it even coming forward.
In that case, I'd be happy to mention a few small points. In 10A of the bylaw, it says a special meeting may be conducted by means of electronic or other communications facilities. And I couldn't find any reference to regular council meetings being conducted that way. And yet we have been conducting them that way. So either I just missed it or something needs to be added for the other types of meetings.
This is actually the section, Councillor Baxter, that we had incorporated in our bylaw prior to COVID that actually enabled us to hold our meetings this way. A lot of the municipalities were scrambling in order to have electronic meetings, and thankfully we already had it incorporated within our bylaw. So I don't know what it'll bring going forward if after COVID, if we will go back to completely in-person meetings, or perhaps it's going to be a hybrid. There's quite a few different options, and I think it's going to be a game changer for a lot of municipalities because many are conducting their meetings this way.
So it might be advisable to, when changing the bylaw, to change it so that it doesn't just refer to special meetings, but but permits electronic holding any kind of meeting electronically, and then also maybe permits the hybrid you're talking about, because that's actually something that I would like to see, is that if we do go back to in-person meetings, that people can still participate virtually if that is, if that's not too difficult to do.
Yeah, we're actually in the process of starting the investigation of having those types of meetings that are hybrids. I'm not 100% sure. It's a lot of on the IT end to determine how that's going to work out. Mm-hmm. But we've had this in place for quite some time, that prior to even COVID, we had the ability to have council members not be in town and be able to come in electronically and still participate in the council meeting. So we did do that previously. But we could look at changing the wording. There hasn't been a very fulsome review of this bylaw since 2004. Like I said, we've made some amendments and made some changes, but this is the time that we really need to review all of these things, and just to change the wording and make it simple wording that everybody can understand.
Okay, a very simple one I noticed was 19B compared to 19C. So in 19B, it says, starting from the beginning, in the case of a council meeting, should the mayor fail to attend within 15 minutes of the time appointed for the meeting, or if the mayor, and then in 19C, which basically I think intends to repeat the same thing only in regards to the chair of a committee, where in B it said, or if the mayor. In C it says, or unless the chair, which I think actually reverses the meaning. And I think they should both say, or if the mayor. So I'll just leave that one with you.
Are you done there, Michael?
I think I've got one more.
Go ahead.
Yeah, F, 24F. If the mayor desires to leave the chair for the purpose of taking part in the discussion, that's just the beginning of it. But I thought we learned from Ellie Mina that the mayor doesn't have to leave the chair to take part in the discussion. And therefore that one can probably be deleted unless there's something I'm not understanding there. Then I am done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. And I must say, I support your sort of concept of let's discuss a few of the major issues here, and then we can sort of see whether the next step is to bring back a revised bylaw, or if we need an interim step to say, here's the 20 things that we've heard and said, and here's how they all come together. But let's carry on the discussion with everybody's points and concerns and see where we get to. Councillor Jansen, I have you next to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just rattle off my list and I won't bore everybody, but this is something I've been keeping my eye on for a bit. Time limits. It does specify some time limits for other people, but it doesn't specify any time limits for ourselves. Whereas most procedures, bylaws, and other communities that I review have some kind of limitation. Ours currently suggests that you can't speak twice to the same item absent a vote of council, which I think I've seen happen once. And I don't think it's unreasonable for us to consider some time limits. And I think this is especially in order as we're moving towards an election year. Anticipate that all of us will get a little more wordy next year, perhaps. So time limits, I know there's 20 minutes for public participation, but I don't recall seeing that there's individual time limits for speakers in public participation. I'm not sure that I've seen that. Sorry, Marcy, did I miss that, or is that in there?
You're correct. There's 20
Yeah, I
minutes.
thought so.
It doesn't elaborate on how long each speaker has.
So to wit, certain people will call up and in their minds, that means they have 20 minutes to babble on. And I don't think that's an appropriate use of that time period. So again, I've looked at other procedures bylaws, and some specify as little as 4 and others are 6. So I think it's not unreasonable to specify some individual speaking allotments of 4 or 5 minutes with an overall time cap of 20 minutes. This is one I've been chewing on for some time. This public participation occurs at every one of our meetings. So in other words, we could have had someone speak today on something completely outside of the scope of this meeting. This is a finance and governance meeting. We could have someone show up and complain about land use issue at their neighbor's house, of which we know there are some things that are ongoing. Again, upon reviewing other people's bylaws, I can think of off the top of my head, View Royal. Your commentary must be connected to the agenda at hand. So there's a link, and it's not just a random free-for-all. I think that's an important point for us, because we hear about all manner of items. And oddly enough, those same people still manage to reach out to us individually, and they manage to reach out to staff. So I don't think it's an imposition, to suggest that people can find other ways to reach staff other than that time period, or us for that matter. Subcommittees, electronic participation. I know Michael's already spoken to that. 27B talks about presentations being limited to 5 minutes. Marcy, and I think that that's short. And I'm quite sure I can't remember a presentation that's only been 5 minutes ever. So, and I think my expectation is, or our expectation is that, I don't think 10 minutes is unreasonable for someone who's taken the time to book a presentation, has been through channels, it's been approved by yourselves, signed off by the CAO, and added to an agenda. I think 5 minutes seems a little light. That's an area where we can maybe add. So there's some ideas. Marcy and Amanda and myself, we have spoken about some of this along the way. I'm sure I'll have more when I get to my notes, which are at home, but that's it for now, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Jansen. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And don't worry, Councillor Jansen, you can have my time next year. I just have a couple of questions through the chair to Marcy. Just in your staff report, I'm going to assume your financial plan council is the financial and governance committee. Is that what you meant, or because you have a financial plan council and I don't know what that is? So, am I right? Yes.
Sorry, are you referring to the statement about it was included in the financial plan for this year under corporate services objectives to get completed within 2021?
Oh, I see. Through the financial plan, council. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Sorry, yes.
I thought it was a new council that we have here. So, okay, that's great. And can I make a suggestion? And this goes with all the amendments that we do. And it would be absolutely helpful. I mean, extremely helpful if we had, the vertical bars you can put in when you make changes. You ever see that in Word documents? Is it possible for us to have that in future? Like, they go away when you put the final draft together, but it really helps you point out, where you've made the major changes. That would be really useful. It's just a recommendation I have. The next point I was going to ask you a question. is the standing committees, the composition of the standing committees, have counselors, have, you know, whoever else we appoint. Is that a statute in the, is there some kind of law that tells us we have to do it that way? Yes? Okay, and it's just select committees, we can have different numbers, correct? Like it's one counselor for select committees, but for standing committees, it's 50-50, correct?
Correct. And the select committees also have different terms of references that might outline different criteria for the amount of council members that might be on it, and as well as citizens. Yes.
The next question I had was, it's more of a comment that's up for discussion, and that was it was 15A, yeah. A meeting of the committee of the whole can be called at any time by the mayor with 24 hours notice to the committee of the whole. Is that what we do right now? I've never had that happen to us. We had special meetings on short notice, but committee of the whole 24 hours notice, it just doesn't seem reasonable to me. If, you know, well, I guess it depends on the agenda, but that's not time to prepare. I just question that 24 hours. So that's just a pointer I have there. And just the last thing that I just wanted to point out, I think it's on our, you know, your standard agenda 20A, where you say, here's the standard, you know, that unless the mayor or 2/3 of the council otherwise directs, the business at all regular meetings of the council shall proceed in the following order. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just thought there was one thing missing, and that's the first thing that we do is the territorial acknowledgement. Just being picky. That's all I had at this time. It's just generic questions. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I did find some difficulty figuring out if anything had been changed in the policy, because we didn't have a past version and a proposed version. We just kind of are looking at what we have. On page 8, number 14F, where revisions are necessary to the schedule of committee meetings, it says that the CAO or the appropriate department head must post notice as soon as possible, and everything else had some time limits. I think there should be some time limits so that we could reflect that, you know, we're not going to give less than 24 hours notice, sort of thing. My other concern was on page 11 on the opening procedures D, when we have not been able to achieve quorum. It doesn't, it's not clear to me whether the meeting would stand adjourned until the next day of meeting. Is that the next day, or is that the next regularly scheduled? Just a little more clarity would be helpful. And on page 12, where it lays out the procedure order for our agendas, just because we have taken to the practice of holding in camera earlier, whether or not that should be reflected in our procedure bylaw, because it does seem to work better. So I thought we should name that. And I agree with Councillor Kobayashi that the territorial acknowledgement is important in there as well. And then on page 13, I just didn't quite understand what a reply meant. It's under 24, rules of conduct and debate, number D. During a meeting of council, no member may speak more than once, and a reply shall be allowed to a member who has made a substantive motion to council, but not a member who has moved an amendment. So I'm not sure what a reply means. I thought we should understand that. On page 25, I just wanted to point out an inconsistency, and it's probably fine the way it is, but in case it should be the same. 25B, when you appeal the decision of the chair, and the question is raised as to whether the chair should be sustained, that is the only occasion in which a tie vote fails to sustain the motion. Normally, you know, so that was different from everything else, and maybe that is appropriate. We don't do those sorts of questions very often, but I thought it was important. And on page 19, it talks about the minutes of the meeting. And really the only thing the charter says about that is that they have to be legible, certified, and signed. And they are supposed to report point of order appeals and results. So I do think that we need to have a bit of discussion at some point in time about making our minutes useful. According to the charter, their main purpose is a legal record. And so I think that is important, but it's also important to engage our public. And my last point is in regards to Councillor Jansen's request to consider some time limits and possibly link people speaking to council having to be regarding something that is on the agenda. And that was, in fact, the policy quite a long time ago in the city of Colwood. And it was very discouraging for members of the public to participate because generally speaking, members of the public aren't as familiar with the protocols, and it can be very difficult and intimidating to speak to council. And so we had tried to open that up to make it more appealing. If you have an issue you just want to let council know about, any time is the right time. And the more conditions that we put on that, and I mean, it can be as simple as letting us know about an issue, and then we can give them some direction as to when a good time to talk about that, or what the best way for them to move forward on their issue is. But I think telling people that we don't want them at council is the wrong way to go. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Mayor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I just made a list, and I'm just going to sort of shotgun through them. And just what we've been discussing today. So in regards to virtual participation, I recognize that we are probably going to need to depend on the province to give us some guidance around that. The one, I find the virtual one incredibly helpful, even pre-COVID. I remember there were times that I had to be in Calgary, and at least I was able to join in on one or two meetings that were incredibly important to the city by phone, and I think that's helpful. Saying that, however, I do think we need to figure out what restrictions we want. I would hate to be in a position where we allow virtual, and then a councillor gets elected and never once comes into chambers and does his or her a full 4 years virtually. And so I think we do need to think about that and how we push people back into chambers, that they can't just be virtual, and that's it. My second point is in regards to presentations, and I guess I will look to Marcy. Marcy, can you please explain to me what So the last meeting we had staff, Mr. Borhill had arranged a speaker. And then I said, you have 5 minutes, and then staff interrupted and said, well, no, staff invited this person so they can have as much time as they want. So can you explain to me the difference?
Normally, the presentations are 5 minutes with 5 minutes for question and answer. So for a total of 10 minutes. If council chooses at a council meeting, they can choose to extend that by 2/3 majority, I think is what's currently in there, to extend a presentation to a longer time frame.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
We may want to look at the wording that's in there to change that. I don't know how council wants to proceed with that. I mean, it is good to have a guideline. You know, we generally stay within it, but we've never done a time clock on presentations. We have done that. Councillor Day did that with public participation for that one committee of the whole recently, and that to me was very successful because when you had 4 people there, they each were given the same amount of time, and it wasn't one in particular person monopolizing the entire time. So there are things to think about.
Thank you. So I agree. And I think having a time limit creates a focus for people. Definitely from a CRD standpoint, CRD public has 4 minutes. And they are, you know, they're green light, yellow light, red light, and 4 minutes happens and they cut the mic off. And people learn that then. And so they learn to make their presentation tight and to move forward. I do support the concept of speaking to topics that are on the agenda. But I also believe that there's a way that if there's a certain topic, for example, Havenwood, if there was a ton of information and people were constantly sending in information about Havenwood and wanting to speak to it, then there would be a way for us to get it onto agenda, which would allow the public to then make comments on that specific subject. So I'm actually supportive of us asking the public to speak to topics that are on the agenda, and then being responsible enough to ensure that we are putting things on the agenda that people wish to speak to. In regards to council and speaking on a topic more than once, I wish to speak to council right now as chair of when I'm running a meeting. We all know this rule, right? And this rule has been explained to us several times. And councillors choose to raise their hand a second time. And so, I mean, it's not my job to be saying, no, I'm not going to let you speak a second time. We all know, and you guys are, all of us are making a choice to speak a second time if you raise your hand. So, I mean, we need to either, as a group, accept that, hey, we're only going to speak once, or we are going to allow people to speak more than once. I don't think it should be the responsibility of the chair to be babysitting the group to saying, hey, I'm not going to let you speak now because you already had one turn. So I would really want to make sure that we're really clear in that as a group, we're on board with this. And that if for example, we decided that we were going to do this and that you only got a chance to speak once, then, you know, I can be really hard on that and cross that line. It's just, I don't want to feel like I'm insulting people by going, well, you've already spoken to this, so I'm not going to let you speak to again, or going and asking for a motion. And then the final point that I think Councillor Kobayashi, and I think it's a good point, he brought up about the 24 hours notice for committee of the whole. I understand why we may need a 24-hour notice for a council meeting, because there may be an emergency that happens and staff need direction to spend money or to do something, and so that there's an urgency to a council meeting. I'm not exactly sure, and maybe staff could explain, what would be the urgency to a committee meeting that would need to be called within 24 hours? Anybody? And I'm done, Chair, after I get that answer.
Okay.
I honestly do not believe that we have called a special committee meeting with 24 hours notice since I've been here, but I could be wrong. You know, there are some things that are in this procedure bylaw that they might not be relative any longer, that we might need to adjust those things, and this might be one of them.
Thank you. Okay, I have Councillor Baxter, Councillor Jansen, and Councillor Day all wishing to speak for the second time, and I'm going to let them all speak because I'm just that kind of guy. But before we, oh no, good, Councillor Kobayashi got what's his But for me, I made a few notes, a number of notes in here, sort of the big picture ones that I wanted to throw on the table at this point. I agree, the acknowledgement, we should probably really address exactly how we want to do that and when we want to do that, what we want to say. That's probably something to add. Notice board and posting locations, I think we want to make sure that we do that digital, and maybe that's enough, or maybe we have to do that as well as other things. And again, the hybrid meeting concepts, I see there's some issues with it, but I think it's probably valuable going forward. So just before I let everybody speak again, to me, it looks like where we're going is we've provided a lot of input to Marcy, and I think she's going to have to take that and perhaps input like the minor things I've got that I can go and talk to her about in person rather than going through it at this meeting. Let Marcy come back with a sort of first kick at the cat on the changes, maybe even in the method that Councillor Kobayashi suggested with the track changes or some way. I wouldn't dare try to attempt to resolve all the issues that have been raised today by amendments and cross amendments and major amendments to what we have in front of us. So I think that's where we're going to end up. But I will, of course, listen to my colleagues, and the first of those is Councillor Baxter.
The first thing I want to speak to is the idea that the public can only speak to what's on the agenda. And I think we need to think about the fact that rules that we might want to make because we're all very reasonable people and would not do anything nefarious might backfire under a different council in a different era. So for instance, if there is something that the council really does not want to ever address, it wants to keep it quiet, then a rule that says you can only bring things up if they're on the agenda plays into that very nicely, because council can just never put it on the agenda. And then nobody can ever speak in the most public way that most people have of speaking. And that is to speak at one of our meetings. So I'm not coming down at this point one way or the other. I'm just saying we have to think about rules in not just in this environment, but in a more troublesome environment, and how they might not work in that case. As for speaking a second time, I'm not aware that of more than one or two occasions perhaps where speaking a second time was ever a problem on this council or committees, unless you think I'm speaking too long right now. But I really would not want to curb Councillor Parkinson's tendencies to speak long and perhaps speak twice. I think it's really important, speaking seriously, I think it's really important that serious issues facing council be thoroughly discussed until everybody's reasonably happy. We have a time limit on the meeting, and if we were consistently hitting that, I might think differently, but we're not consistently hitting the time limit. We hardly ever hit the time limit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Jansen.
Thanks. Just a couple of small things. In answer to your worship's concern, the procedures bylaw specifies that it's by leave of council. So you never have to say no. You have to say, okay, let's have a vote, and it's up to us, and we throw our hands up. It's an easy out. It's not you saying no, it's the group saying no or yes. So that's just a point. Now, the other thing is too, is that, and Marcy, I'm going to take a stab at this without having it in front of me, but this particular meeting is governed by a committee of the whole, committee portion of the procedures bylaw. committee portion of the procedures bylaw speaks differently than the council portion. And I believe there's a disconnect there. And in fact, all of this, the subcommittee structure is governed by the committee of the whole structure, which then talks about only having, the differences that we all know about committee of the whole with only a mover and no seconder, that kind of idea. But also it takes away the other point is that it removes the clause about only speaking once to an item. So in other words, to your point, Michael, during committee of the whole, it's a free-for-all. We can speak 17 times if we want. That's my recollection, and I believe that's accurate. And I believe that the committee of the whole governance should be the same as the council meeting. And I'm not sure why we differentiate between the both, because essentially it's tomato. I would like to see the procedures bylaw standardized across the board, one set of rules, regardless of what day of the week or what kind of meeting it is, a subcommittee or a council or a committee of the whole meeting. So that's just food for thought. Marcy, was I wrong in anything I said there?
No, you're not wrong. It does differentiate within the current bylaw of standing and select and committee of the whole. But since we've moved back to the committee of the whole process, we haven't incorporated a lot of those details, and this would be the time to do that. By the time, I take all this information from council, there might be a possibility that we might want to look at the replacement of this bylaw, because there might be that many changes to make it nice and clean and fresh copy. So I will be looking very thoroughly at those sections and seeing what are the best practices going forward. And the new guide that just came out is a great tool to do that. And that's why I provided it with that report to assist council to see, what are some other municipalities doing. I've been looking at some other ones that have recently changed, and hopefully we can incorporate some of those changes to make this smoother. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I've lost my place now. So many good topics. But I think it's important to remember that, like most communications, there's kind of a lot of unwritten rules of communication that are about starting in the general and then focusing down into finer and finer points till we're being much more formal when we're at council and we're chopping through because everybody is familiar with all of the details of the subject matter that we're discussing. So that's kind of why committee of the whole is looser, more wide-ranging. We're imagining that if we're in committee of the whole, we're at the beginning of our understanding of an issue, and we're trying to hash it out and get so that we're all on the same page and understand it. And then when we get to council, we're trying to get quicker and more succinct in our recommendations going forward so they can be captured and become part of the legal record, and the city moves on and we've made a decision. So I think it's really important when we do this that we make council inviting, because when I first started participating in local government, it was very uninviting, and that brings with it a lot of risks to the, not just to, whether or not you're going to get reelected the next time, but whether or not your community feels comfortable and supported in the way that it's governed. So, if you have, 90 people come to council chambers and they all leave saying, I don't know why I bothered to come, it made absolutely no difference whatsoever, then your much less likely to get buy-in to any of the endeavors that you might want to put forward with I can't think of the name of that process, but where you might seek an alternative approval process or go out to your community to seek approval for funding something. So I think that it's really important to remember that all of those things have value, including the guy who shows up and says, you know, I can never find a garbage can when I need one. Those simple comments can lead you to discover things about your community that you never knew. So when we get to things like the notice or being able to go into committee of the whole, those things all happen to work really well if you have the right situation. Committee of the whole might need to be called if we'd had a massive earthquake and all of our roadways are shut down, and you need to call a committee of the whole because you're going to have to hash out what your priorities are going to be, rather than simply getting together to, that's it, we know all the information, we know what we're going to do, here's our plan of action, are you for it or against it? Might be quite different than trying to figure out whether you should open this road or that road, based on the input that you get of who's how long it's going to take to clear with what machinery you've got or whatever. So it's really important that when we imagine our procedure bylaw, we don't only think about what our experiences have been in the last 2 or 3 years, but also what have they been in other places, and will this procedure bylaw carry you through safely, no matter what happens in the community? That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, you know, I feel sorry for the mayor actually, because there was an agreement actually about us speaking once, and you know, and sometimes I find myself biting my tongue, and I'll walk away from meetings very frustrated because, you know, we're not having dialogue. You know, everyone's making a point. You get to speak once, and you have, that's not dialogue. I'm sorry, but it's not. You're all stating a position, and then what I don't like about it, when you don't get a second chance to speak, is if someone personally attacks you, you know, or attacks your position, and you don't get a chance to rebut it. You know, that's not debate. You know, if you don't get to rebut, and I personally will tell you right now, I feel very frustrated sometimes after council meetings because you don't get to rebut because you want to play by the rules. And so I understand, Mayor Martin, what frustrations you have with this, because how do you control it? I mean, how do you do this? So, you know, I have a funny, you know, I have a simple rule. I think that if your position is being attacked, personally attacked, I think you should have the opportunity to rebut it. You know, you should have that opportunity, because otherwise you're going to go away like me and you're going to be frustrated. And so, but you know, I try to play by the rules, and the only time I'll put my hand up the second time, like this time, is when I see you accept it, you start accepting it from everyone. So I just want to make this point right now, because it's not dialogue. Dialogue is when you're talking with one another and we're all stating a position. That is not dialogue. So I just thought I'd bring that out. And there's nothing that I don't disagree with what the other councillors have said. It's all good stuff, you know, and it's sinking in here. But I just thought I'd like to bring up that point. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. So I have Councillor Baxter, Councillor Day, Councillor Jansen, all with their hands up. I'm assuming those are left up from before. Councillor Baxter, you still have your hand up. Do you want to speak or you want to lower your hand? Attaboy. Good work. So if I could summarize, we've all provided a bunch of input. I think some of us have indicated maybe we've got other little niggly things that we could pass on. I think that the next step is to throw this back to Marcy and the rest of corporate services and say, we need you to come back, not with the final bylaw, but at least with something that we think is close enough that we could deal with it. But I'd be prepared to listen to either Marcy or our CAO as to what they believe our next steps should be here, because I don't know if we're deferring, referring, ignoring, or what we're going to do here. So some guidance would be appreciated.
Sorry, my apologies. I'm not able to put my hand up. Oh, I see the CAO has his hand up. I could let him go first and then
Okay.
need me.
Mr. Earl, your recommendation, please.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. I think administration has what we need to do exactly what you said. We would warmly welcome any further input by way of email or conversation from this point forward, but we will endeavor to come back with either a draft amended bylaw or a draft new bylaw if the amendments are such that it makes more sense to start from a blank page. We will group those into the areas that we've heard from today and then use the best practices manual as a guidepost as we bring options forward for council to consider next. It would be administration's recommendation that we come back again to committee rather than council though, because we think further massaging of the document will be needed.
Great. And we may have some people who want to speak 2 or 3 times to it, so that's fine. So then do we just adjourn, or do we make a motion to that effect, or how do I stick handle this without reading the whole bylaw to figure out what I should be doing for Mr. Earl?
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. Unless Ms. Lalonde wants to correct me or provide further information, I think we have everything we need. No further motion is required.
Well, I could look to then Councillor Logan. He may want to make a motion here. Councillor Logan moves adjournment. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye all.
Bye.